Welcome y'all back to the 90proof Lounge. Conversations of the 90s, the golden era, 100% hip-hop and G-Funk, Nick Cleve, and Spliff. What's happening?
What's going on, man? Just enjoying me a brew.
Yep.
Dinosaur from Phillips.
Yeah, got a shout out to Phillips for this one, man. The dinosaurs are nice and tasty. It's a feel-good Friday, man. We got 3 East Coast groups that we're going to discuss today, 3 albums. We have Onyx Back the Fuck Up in 93, Gravediggaz 6 Feet Deep in 94, and Def Squad El Nino in 98. So we are going to discuss these albums and these groups, and we're going to go with Onyx Back the Fuck Up first.
First one released?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, first one released. It's only fair. For me, this is one of my favorite albums from the 90s as far as East Coast. And the more I listened to it, when I knew we were going to do this episode, the more I listened to it, I honestly think that this album may hold the title for the grimiest, most hardcore rap album from the East Coast from a group in the 90s.
I would definitely disagree with that. 36 Chambers is gonna definitely rival it, though that's a completely different conversation. Yeah, I mean, if I gave it some more thought, there's gonna be some more albums in there, but 36 Chambers has to be one of the grimiest albums ever made. I mean, it literally sounds like it's in a fucking dungeon.
Yeah, I definitely think they're definitely playing in the same ballpark. So
yeah, I get it. It's real street shit. I mean, it has that. You get that street feel all the way through. That
I'm still scared of this album. Like when you hear, it's just such a good mix, and they, they're dressed in all black. They got the like Attack of the Bald Head type of approach and mentality to it. But yeah, when it comes down to the songs on them, man, when you hear Slam, I mean, that shit is just, it's a party jam. For me, it was obviously the single that stood out back then. But yeah, man, like, and it still kept that same production feel like it did throughout the whole album. And I really dug this album back in the day. I'd have to say that Sticky was definitely my favorite in the group, but I enjoyed Fredro and Sun Seas, and yeah, man, I enjoyed this album a lot, man, especially back in the 90s.
I bought this album, I think, like no more than a year after it came out. It probably wasn't a year, but I can't nail it dead on, but I didn't mind it back in the day. I listened to it a whole bunch over the last month or so. And for me, with all the albums that come out of the 90s, and there's so much flavor, there's so many different original styles and mentalities and characters that are out there, this one isn't big for me. Do I see the respect that this album got? Yeah, I see exactly what everybody else saw.
Right.
It just, for me, it didn't hit the mark. And there's a lot of reasons for it. One, I felt like Chai Skill's beats, it was great that they used them all the way through the album. It was great because it made this entire package deal. And
created a sound for him.
It totally. And it goes from, beginning to end, it has that same sort of feel. It's very fluid. And, as a debut album, they definitely bring everything you'd expect from a new artist, or from any artist for that matter. I mean, there's great lyrics, there's great beats. Overall, what I think really threw me off was the overall sort of mix that the album had. I wasn't a big fan of it. It not that it was too bass heavy or anything. It just, I thought that the overall mix with the beats was overshadowed by this lyrical assault of these. They were just crazy animals on the mic.
Yeah,
they were ripping everything apart. Right.
That's what I love about the shit.
And I think that's what most people did.
Yeah,
and these chanting sort of choruses that they brought constantly. Every second song had this sort of chanted chorus. But again, that's some street shit. That's You don't really fuck the choruses. We're just gonna
More or
throw
less-
these in and get
more or less
everybody
New
to yell.
York, more or less New York shit. Like you weren't hearing a lot of that, like you said with the Enter the 36 or whatever. Like they kind of had that a little bit of a chant as a group kind of thing, and you weren't seeing that as much on the West and the South.
There's like 2 choruses on 36 Chambers. Almost every song on this album has some version of a chorus or a bridge or
on
somebody
Back the Fuck Up.
Yeah, definitely. They definitely tried to put together these proper formulas. I mean, you got JMJ Records is putting this shit together. I mean, it might as well be Run DMC doing it for you, right?
Such a crazy thing to think of for me when you say that. It's like there's Run DMC and then there's like these younger dudes are putting out that are just the real deal young grimy motherfuckers, like
and you get, because Run DMC is, affiliated and friends with Large Professor. Chai Skills worked with Large Professor. They brought him in. And at the end of the day, I almost would have to believe that Chai Skills is like an honorary member of Onyx. I mean, the amount of love that was given to him, right up until he passed away. Yeah. He was still connected with him. He was still making beats with him and stuff like that.
On the cover, right?
No, that's Big DS. He's the other MC on.
Oh, okay.
All 4 of them are MCs on there.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe at some point during the project, DS maybe went to jail because there's songs where they're talking about freeing him.
I don't think he's on all of the.
Yeah, I went through. He's on it. Like
everyone
5 or 6 songs. No.
Okay, everyone. Yeah, I said that. I meant like I don't think he was on every single track. Like Sticky Fredro were on every one.
He's on there about 3 times as many as you gods on 36 Chambers. So,
okay.
But at the end of the day, yes, it all 4 of them are on there. All 4 of them have. The more you listen to it, you get a different sort of feel of the same influence from them. And for me, I would rather spend my time listening to another album. Though I did put in a lot of effort listening to this one, and some songs stood out, but it bothered me in the end because I think some of the beats that Chai Skills made for this album, I sort of envision other people doing songs to it, and I think I would have really loved to have heard that rather than these songs that we got from Onyx. And again, I'm not trying to hack down what Onyx did here. Onyx came out with a bang, and it's very, very unique persona. Yes, there's a lot of street cats out there with street persona,
but they didn't do that, right?
Yeah, well, they were. Yeah, you basically it was like a live TV show. It was real life TV with these cats.
And you're watching a movie with these guys, and these guys are believable.
And that was the whole album, and that was what they were doing. I mean, you see it later on too. That persona never really left those guys. When you see Fredro Starr, battle Keith Murray in 2015 and how dedicated to it he is, right?
Even today, like I have a friend of mine that went on tour actually with Fredro and Sticky, and he's like, yo, there's no, I can't explain how real these guys are. Like whatever you picture Onyx being in your head, they roll like that every day. Like Hennessy, Flight, rowdy ass, like smaller venue shows, back to the hotel. That's their attitude, right? And he's like, it was so cool to see like those rappers from the 90s actually be those dudes, because there's always those things about guys not being who they put themselves out there to be,
right?
And you believe it in the music, and I think that's who these dudes really are. And the craziest thing about this album is they put a stamp on hip hop, and they also, like Fredro and Sticky both did well in the movie industry, and went on to do big things. So this album I hold close, and it's actually funny because you showed me this album when I was a kid, and I just remember seeing the album cover, and just right when you hear it, the album cover fits the music, and they murdered that.
Oh, they start off with a bang. Yeah, that's for sure.
The intro especially. The intro, back the fuck up. The Onyx is here. Like, you can't tell me that's like, okay, Onyx is here.
And they carried the vibe all the way through. And you gotta give that credit. I mean, absolutely. And they did. I mean, they won Soul Train Award. Yeah. There was they were nominated for like 6 or 7 other awards. I know a number of them were with the Source magazine, but at the time there was some credibility there.
Definitely. Some love being shown.
But dissecting this a little bit more, like if you're going to influence somebody to listen to this album and go, you know what, I love what Nick has to say about this album. I like what he has to say about all the music that I sort of listen to these guys talk about. What is it that really goes, this is what I'm going to play right now. I'm going to play this album because I know that when I'm going through these tracks, these are the songs that are going to stand out for me. Like, for you, what really, obviously Slam, you mentioned it before, but that's kind of his hit, which is weird because I wasn't
Onyx is here the
huge
song
fan.
because Onyx is here the song because, and I love how they put it, and I love how it was where they put it in the album is when I heard Back the Fuck Up, the intro, I was like so disappointed when I first heard that shit again from when I was a kid to be like, man, that's not a song. And then it gets to Onyx is here, you're like, oh, it is a song, like
Crazy bass line,
crazy bass line. The Onyx is here and shit, and even there, I love how they even used like the chant, sort of the chant interludes. Bust that ass, oh bust that ass.
Yeah.
Like everyone's like getting rowdy, right? But I would say, bitch ass motherfuckers. The second, I think it's number 2. Yeah, it's number 2, and then. Throw your guns in the air and buck like you just don't care, like, and I had to go rewatch the video to that, and that crazy.
Yeah, I liked actually the overall feel of Throw Your Guns In.
Yeah,
that was it. It was more attractive to me than a lot of the other songs.
right.
I always love giving credit to songs that stick under 5 minutes and stick to a formula and they play it out. I mean, if a song's more than 5 minutes, I don't generally hold that against them if there's a good reason. And there's a number of reasons why you can, but a lot of the time, if you're exceeding 5 minutes, I mean, you're going to have a reason for
Especially when it's pure lyricism. If I mean, you really got to
there's a bunch of reasons to give one. I mean, you could have the beat play. You could have a sick beat play. You could have cuts on it. You could have you could have talking for whatever reason. I mean, KRS-One could talk for 10 minutes and you'd be like, dude, this is so fucking dope, right? Like, it's just there's Snoop Dogg's the same way, right? Like there's Nas, motherfuckers just got voices that
Can go.
right. And same too. I mean, there's a reason why you use Cat's beats. I mean, Ant Banks is the best for it. You ever use an Ant Banks beat? The first thing he probably tells you is you got to play that for like a minute. When the song's done, you got to play the beat for like a minute.
Yeah,
and you're not going to disagree because his beats are amazing.
Yeah,
right.
It's crazy.
So, in saying respecting the formula, one of the better formulas I thought they had was Black Vagina Finder. I wasn't a huge fan of the song.
That was
but
that was one of the songs I would have actually taken off the track.
Really?
Or the record.
I just like the way that they put the song together. Again, not being a big fan of the whole album, I think in general, there was Stick and Move for me did stand out.
Yeah,
I would
like
still
that
bump
too.
that.
Yeah.
I still kind of get a good feel for that one. And I believe that was like their first real song that they had on the album. And I think it was actually something that really kind of got them signed and got them in the door, was having a song like that already sort of preset before they got in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what was going on there, I would have definitely signed a group I had.
I actually forgot one of the songs that really stood out for me was I forgot about it. Attack of the Bald Heads.
Yeah.
Loved it. The beat, attack of the bald, and like the way they, man. The chorus was deep and like the voices in it were dope. Like I really just enjoyed Attack of the Bald Heads. And like I said, there was other than Black Vagina Finder, and I like when they did sort of the chant interlude I was talking about with the Bootleggaz.
Oh, that was hilarious.
It reminded me actually, it just right out blatantly, be like, you get shot.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of old video I saw Tupac walking down the street. He actually caught a bootlegger like pumping his cassette out of this little cassette. He's like, take my shit off of there now. And it reminded me like of what they're talking about, right? 'Cause especially then.
You'd be lit if you saw that shit going on.
Yeah, exactly. So when I heard that, I was like, and it just shows you it was a thing back then, right? That they were that's taking money out of their pocket. They're not having that. So I like that the Bootleggaz interlude. If you had to, what would you rate Back the Fuck Up out of 10?
I battled on this one because it's hard to not be personally drawn to something that you know deserves accolades. And I think it deserves maybe something higher than I would give it, but personally, musically, to listen to this album, it was a 4 out of 10 for me. I don't honestly
Not
think
even
that's
the halfway mark.
No, honestly, I don't think that's entirely fair to the album in general. If there was a discussion with several other people here, it would definitely be altered by what I think a lot of other people would believe. I mean, I got a cat at work that's about 28 or 29 now, so he's a few years younger, and he's just sort of getting into 90s hip hop. His intro into hip hop was Eazy-E, BG, Knockout, Dresta, and he loved that shit. So and I hadn't heard that album. He was like, "Yeah, you got to check this out." So I checked that out, and he just listened to Gravediggaz and Onyx.
Yeah.
Because I mentioned to him, I said, "Listen, I'm going to be chatting about this on the podcast. We're going to go on 90proof. We're gonna check these albums out." He's like, "Dope." So then he texted me that he's like, "Man, that Onyx shit was banging." He was
Really?
like, "That was some hardcore shit." He's like, I love that they were like, it felt like it was straight from the streets. He's like, and listened to a few of the songs that he enjoyed, and you could tell that the exuberance in his voice was kind of entertaining because it was the first time he had heard this shit.
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about albums that are, it's coming up on its 30-year anniversary, right?
Yeah.
So,
and still we're sitting here talking about it, and to be honest, it's like what you said. I understand what you're saying because it comes down to a preference thing, and this hits so hard in so many different ways. It's easy to love and it's easy to not like. You know what I mean? It's easy. There's a lot of people that I think would share the same opinion that you have, especially you being a really deep East Coast rap fan. When you give that the rating that you gave it, I mean, I think there's a lot of people, even from the East Coast, that would understand it. Hell, to be honest, there's a part of me that thinks even Onyx would understand it because they'd be like, "Dude, that was our first album. Have you heard their next album after that?"
excellent. And even it just kind of gets better after that.
Yeah.
And you start to see sort of the growth in Sticky and Fredro too. And obviously the amazing camaraderie that they have. I mean, they're related,
cousins,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So you know that there's already a pre-existing relationship there. But it just, for me, it's one I think you really need to judge for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I wouldn't normally say that. Normally I'd be like, yeah, this shit's a 5 or this is a 6 and this is exactly why. But it's hard to not be a fan of an album that you know is great. And look at the careers that it made. As you said, they get into, 2 of them get into movies and TV and
do
multiple
well, yeah.
albums. And they're discovered by, JMJ. And you get, these connections like legends right off the bat. I mean, there's obviously something there that should be loved.
And they stood out too because I think it was the show. Was it the show? Yeah, was it? When Russell was talking about him, when was what he was saying, talking in his eyes that he was talking about it like he loved that group, and it's crazy that they had. That was the overall impact, is like, these dudes are wild, these dudes are fucking cool, and ended up there's a lot of history with this album to me. This is like the start of a lot of good things, and they always kind of stayed these dudes. They never really went to Hollywood. They never did anything. They did movies, and it all started. This is the base
that
plate.
Shit 100%.
This is the base plate, right? And they murdered it, man. Who was your favorite if you had to pick between Fredro and Sticky?
Oh, it's a tough one. Fredro's so composed and lethal. He's like a fucking assassin, and it's hard to be an assassin when the guy you're standing with is a psycho with lyrics flying everywhere and killing everything inside him.
Yeah,
Sticky's a mental case.
Sticky's, yeah.
I mean, he'll take a song that you listen to, you'll be 3 minutes in, and you'll be like, yeah, this is all right. And he'll start rapping, and you're like, this is fucking sick.
Yeah.
Like, what?
And the voice just
Dude.
goes with it too. He's got the
Yeah.
raspy voice, and Fredro, I think, and if you listen to him talk like now, he's actually pretty more smooth voiced than anything. So
He's
I
kind
think
of always been that way,
right.
though,
So
right?
but I think the whole persona of Onyx was like that grimy, that kind of voice. So Fredro kind of like maybe added that on a little bit more than Sticky just naturally talks like that.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, he's Sticky, let me say it. You know what I mean? And like, it's Sticky. If I had to pick between the two, love them both. Seriously, love both their musics and love them almost equally on this album. But if I had to pick, it would be Sticky.
For me on this album, I think if you don't know what's going on, Sticky really does stand out.
Yeah.
I think he, on this album, probably would be considered sort of the star figure of it all.
I would say,
that's not cutting down the other guys. Even Suave, Sonny came through and dropped some sick raps.
Right.
Like, I mean, he really did. He was
Yeah.
on so much, right?
He did, yeah, he did actually.
And it's not like he didn't deserve his spot. He 100% did.
Yeah.
Different flow, inspired by the cats that he's rapping with. And to be totally honest, I don't think Big DS needed to be, he deserved his role there too. I went back and
Absolutely.
specifically found the songs and his verses that he did and tried to look at it, examine it as much as I could, because he doesn't quite have the influence the other ones do, but they really are, a collection of rowdy cats from the streets. And it's great because it never really leaves them. As you said, they further down in their career, you still get that liveness from them. Yeah.
It was funny that when we spoke, and I actually kind of want to do more things like this with 90 Proof. And when we spoke about who we would add to the group, if there was somebody that you could add to the group in the 90s or whatever that just would have fit so well. And it was funny because we both were speaking about how Mystical would have been there's a lot of similarities with him and
You would have
Mystical.
had to shave his head.
Yeah, you would have had to say, and that was a lot of his persona was the braids. But I think I would love to ask Mystical one day if he comes on a 90 Proof if he had an influence from Onyx.
Interesting. As far as adding somebody, I don't think there's any room.
Yeah, no,
Those cats are. I mean,
Busta Rhymes
if there
too
was
would be-
more people in that group, Sticky and Fredro ate them.
exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
there's no evidence, right? As far as me sort of critiquing it the way I did, what out of 10, what do you see this album as?
7 hard. I mean, a 10 is some people can say it's unheard of. To get a 10 out of 10 where it's immaculate on every single level of the game I'm yet to pick a 10. 9 is the closest thing to a 10. Is there flaws to this album? Absolutely. 8 is just 7 is just it's got flaws, but it hits where I like it, man. I have to give it a 7.
You have a favorite song?
Has to be no, I don't have a favorite, but I have favorites. I like Here and Now, Throw Your Guns, and I'm not gonna say Slam because it's the most known one, so I would have to say Onyx is Here.
Yeah, I got to say Stick and Move. It just stood out much more for me.
Yeah, and I do like that one too.
It would have been interesting to see if they had gone in another direction and something more in line with Stick and Move had come out. I wonder who actually really pushed the what Back the Fuck Up became as an album, because they really did let loose, and it's a very raw album.
Oh, that's really, really why I love this album or have so much love for it, is because of the rawness to it. And yeah, the rawness is crazy because I would have loved to see what those studio sessions were like. Seriously, if they were dressed like that and they were in the booth screaming and yelling, like, it could have been one of two. It could have been just hard to even be there, or it would have been something that you'll never forget. I think either or you would have never forgot. So I think I would have loved to see any one of these, the intro, slam, any one of those chant tracks because I guarantee you they were side by side in the booth for most of that.
Probably.
Like a lot of those guys. I mean, Nas, I heard would bust his solo verses with like 20 guys in the booth with him, like at some point, right? So yeah, it's a 7 out of 10 for me, man. It's an unbelievable album that I'm glad we got to discuss here at the 90 Proof Lounge. And if you're cool with it, man, we can tip our glasses. And Onyx, back the fuck up, baby.
100%. Really would have loved to have seen more from Chai Skills and see if he could have maybe entered another sort of genre of hip hop, another sort of subgenre, and see him work with some other people, because it did stay kind of niche for him.
You didn't really hear those type of beats other than.
Well, he worked with them for a while.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about with any other East Coast projects that were kind of coming out at that exact time. They were kind of the ones that had that style of production through.
I think that was it made it sound unique because of the editing, which was one of the one of the problems I kind of had. The mix of it all sort of, I thought that his beats could have been a little bit highlighted a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of people may call it a classic album, right? Like it definitely has that.
Oh, I definitely think it's in the category of a classic album, for sure. So if you're cool with it, we can just go ahead and get into. All right, we're about to dive into this second album here. We just discussed Onyx, Back the Fuck Up, the one that I brought to the table. Love the album, but let's dive into Gravediggaz 6 Feet Deep. Came out in 94. Thought it was an unbelievable album. Spliff, you picked it, so I'll let you start it off.
Well, I love this one because it's kind of a tale of two stories here, right? Like you have what Prince Paul brought to the table, started the album, got them recording, and then sort of the RZA influence once the Wu-Tang came out, and how that sort of changed the remainder of the album, and how they brought that together as a project. It was dope because having it with Onyx on the same show is nice because they're both, debut albums and got that New York underground grimy sort of feel. Different stories behind what they're trying to, get across in their albums, but they had a similar feel. I love the sort of griminess. If you like one, you're probably gonna like the other. There's a good chance of that, right?
Yeah.
For me, I liked the beginning part of this album, the first probably half, where you could really see the Prince Paul influence right off the bat. I love the relaxed, hypnotic sort of smoother feel that was going on,
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I love this album for many different reasons. I love this album. When I first got introduced to it, actually first saw it when I was probably, 6, 7 years old in your collection, and I just thought the album cover was super sick. Other than that, with RZA being a part of it off the bat, which I think a lot of people would do, is they would think that, this is RZA's group, RZA's production, right off, not knowing any details of it, which is exactly what I did. But as I got more into it, talking to you about it, a lot more things that I love to it. When you look at just the beginning of the album, as you said, when you get into Constant Elevation, I think it sets the tone for the entire album. And it's just... It was cool to hear Constant Elevation because I was without getting into the details, strictly just listening to it right away, I was like, man, RZA really kind of stepped out of what he usually does. Then you get to know a little bit more about it, and Prince Paul was the guy that did the production for it, which I thought was even more dope. But as you said, you started to see RZA's influence when I think it got to Diary of a Madman, and I think that's what you had said, where RZA kind of had maybe got into his comfort zone, and the producer was coming out of him as much as the artist. And there's just so many good things about this. And my favorite track off it right off the bat is Mommy, What's a Gravedigger? Just short, sweet. And I knew that you had mentioned when we were speaking about it that they had known Prince Paul and these guys had known RZA since he was Prince Rakim, and I actually noticed that in that song they actually call him Prince Rocky. So that was a kind of a love, like, you know, just having love for each other since back then. And you hear the things like Defective Trip, man. Like when I heard that song, I was like, that beat is out of control. You know what I mean? Like, and
well, go back to the Mommy What's a Gravedigger beat. I mean,
it's my favorite part about it.
Just so smooth and charming. Like, it's just like so much of that hypnotic flow that's going on in the album, and it like really kind of entrances you and brings you into these psychotic and morbid thought processes that they're going through. But it's you want to be there with it. You know, it's not appalling, it's pulling you towards it, and you're like, yeah, fuck, I'm up on my head.
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of cool to see, because you're gonna have to refresh my brain here. We talked about it. What was the one that was really sounds like the 36 Chambers? Like, it was actually off of the 36 Chambers album.
Oh yeah. Graveyard Chamber.
And even the Graveyard Chamber name, like the 36 Chambers. So I think that might have been purposely done. I don't know. Just letting maybe RZA kind of take charge maybe of doing that one. But when I hear, since we have these two on the table, right? It's Onyx, it's Gravediggaz, and they both come, as you said, from that grimy New York street shit. You get to 6 Feet Deep. 6 Feet Deep, I think, is the biggest comparison between these two albums. I think there's a lot of comparison in the griminess and just pure griminess when it comes to 6 Feet Deep, comparing it to Onyx and Back the Fuck Up. I liked to make that comparison there.
Yeah.
I also think that song, this is just a shot in the dark here. I think that production on that song was probably a 50-50 split almost with RZA and Prince Paul. I would have loved to be in the studio when they made that. I felt like it was just so much of each of them blended in, because I didn't really, besides Graveyard Chambers, which was clearly like what I just said, more of the RZA foot forward, but I think it was... you could kind of tell this was a Prince Paul overtook this whole thing, and it was kind of controlled by him. But yeah, when I heard 6 Feet Deep, I was like, that sounds like a big mashup between the two guys.
Well, especially when you compare it to The Sickle later on, when they come out with their second album, you can clearly see RZA was like, boys, let's get back together. Let's do another album here, right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about 6 Feet Deep, the intro is hilarious, eh?
Yeah, love it. Yeah, and it's just everything about the album. It was so, you know, it was so 1-800-Suicide was an amazing track for me. Just everyone, and it was cool to see after, you know, Enter the 36 Chambers comes out, and you really know, even though RZA does make a huge appearance on this album, he's kind of the engine for the group. He's kind of the one that's taking care of, you know, 8 other members that are, you know, I think it was at that time it was 7-8 other guys, right? That he's controlling. So it was fun to see RZA basically take more of an artist role, while someone else kind of let him step out of that seat until he was kind of comfortably just dove in there, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you're dealing with, I think, people that are sort of on that genius level that RZA seems to show. I mean, he's multifaceted. I mean, the guy's I believe his kung fu skills are incredible. You know, he makes scores for movies. He's in movies.
Good movies.
Yeah, his impression is immense in the game, and when you give him that outlet to be certain characters he maybe doesn't get a chance to release. I mean, look at what he did with Bobby Digital. You get this Wu-Tang shit out. You get these artists out that need to be flaunted, need to be pushed, because the world wants them. I mean, they want Ray. They want Meth. Yeah. They want ODB. And then he gets his chance to kind of come out, and he's got, you know, all the control he wants, and he gives you Bobby Digital. I think you're sort of seeing the original version of the animal that's trapped inside RZA come out when he got to be the Resurrector. Yeah. And he really was a wild animal. Yeah. And working with Too Poetic as well. I mean, that guy's got to have quite the influence on you. Yeah. And ODB.
Yeah, like that. You can see that was there. And you can always have an opinion, whether people agree with it, disagree with it, whatever. I think because Enter the 36 had come out, Cream was definitely out before this album had been released. Just that success level, and realize that people are really digging that shit. I think it was a bit of a push for Gravediggaz, and when they did this album, Prince Paul's always going to try and make albums, but I think that the Wu-Tang and what RZA was doing was an influence on this group as well.
Prince Paul and the RZA, I believe, both came out at some point, I think 2015, and actually said that.
Okay.
Well, they were trying to, Prince Paul, I believe, was trying to shop it around. One of the places he ended up getting to was Ruthless Records.
Wow.
And I from what I had read, he had talked to Heller, and the deal was, in his words, appalling. And so we didn't get that kind of collaboration, which you can imagine how incredible that might have been.
Yeah.
And ends up releasing it on G Street, which I believe is the same label that Bobby Digital comes out.
Oh, okay. So he wasn't even. I would have thought the Bobby Digital would have been under Loud, but I don't know. Might have been, might not have been. But if it was under G Street, you're probably right.
Yeah, I'd have to check it. Why would you think it's under Loud?
Just because from my understanding is that Wu-Tang was under Loud, and then they were all able. Oh no, you're right. They all went and got their own singles, like Def Jam and Electric for ODB.
And they changed the game because of that.
Yeah,
when RZA signed Wu-Tang as the group, and everyone was able to sign off in their own direction, right?
I stand corrected. And one small thing that stood out for me, which was cool, I think it's is the outro with Ice Cube, using the Ice Cube sample. Just, showing that West Coast love, especially at that time. It was, they did, I think it was on the outro, they used Ice Cube. There was the Ice Cube.
Rest in peace. Huh.
And they used the Ice Cube
sample. I
sample.
remember sitting there going, that's an amazing sample. And I couldn't place it.
It wasn't, besides Biggie in 93, where he used, I think it was the first song, and he used Dre and Snoop. Back in the day, we used to scrap, right? But other than that, they as we've spoken about with guest appearances and stuff, that there was even before the huge clash, it was East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, West Coast. So to see that they did that, I don't know if it was purposely. It definitely put a nice touch on it for me when I heard that sample on the outro. I was like, that's fucking dope.
I don't know how much the East Coast, West Coast was affecting these cats. I mean, it was them versus the industry,
right?
And they showed love just to the music, and that shit I don't think. But I'm sure they paid attention to it. But
but just to even see that was cool that they threw. I was like, that's dope. It just wasn't expected, and I like to be kind of thrown off when it comes to an album in a good way, and I like how they did that. And like I said, this was, to me, when I listened to, because I think RZA's one of the more talented guys in Wu-Tang. He's a great guy to listen to when it came to the Wu-Tang material, and I gotta say, I mean, for me personally, this is probably my favorite RZA material alone. The group was amazing. Gravediggaz, the whole situation was dope. But for me, when you're like, okay, pinpoint what was the dopest shit for you, I was like, man, this is like some of RZA's best material. He was just wild, man. He was an animal on this whole album. I don't think there's one verse that I was like, nah. RZA came correct every time. He spit, and so
Graveyard Chamber. Graveyard Chamber. I listened to it twice today. Not a fan. But again, it's a song we both kind of looked at, agreed, and deduced that it's really not, doesn't feel like its place on this album is fitting.
Right.
I would actually take the song right off the album if I was, executive producing it or whatever my involvement would be. I would say, like, guys, I don't know if you're hearing this, but
it sounds like, and I wouldn't disagree with you. Not that it's a bad song, it just wasn't, the placement wasn't good for it. And it's funny that you mentioned the executive producing. Like I said at the beginning, thinking that RZA did this, I thought it was amazing. I thought he stepped out and proved his versatility with being able to do that. But I was wondering what the album may have sounded like if RZA did the production. I wonder if it had been a successful. I don't think it would have. I think Prince Paul, especially so close into the debut of Wu-Tang and the debut of Gravediggaz, or when it comes to the recording process, late months apart. So I wonder if what it would have sounded like if it was a pure RZA role of him doing the executive production on it.
Well, he has so much control over the sickle that you kind of get that feel a couple years later, right? He's a much more refined version of who he is as the Resurrector on 6 Feet Deep, but he does take a lot of initiative on the second album. So I think you do get that look right there.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that, I've heard the Sickle before. I've listened to it front to back. I'd have to go re-listen to it to have a discussion like we're having now. But my preference is way more a fan of this album.
Oh, agreed.
Than the Sickle.
Agreed.
But I could see why you would like the Sickle. It's all a preference thing, like with hip hop heads, man. So was Sickle a dope album? Liked it. Would love to re-listen to it again. But I've heard this so many times, and I place it so high. Like, you know what I mean? In the rap history. But
I think it's like people trying to compare like Scarface the Diary with Scarface My Homies. You know, there's a much more industrial feel about My Homies, is what you kind of see as well with this sort of genius mentality that Riz is putting behind a project. It's, he's got a couple of just one verse songs on there. He's got some other songs that are very religious, as far as like Allah and stuff like that, and and their love for Islam. And at the end of the day, this album, I think when you listen to it like musically, I do like it a little bit better.
yeah,
I would agree with that.
And there's this certain me. I just sometimes it could be the smallest thing, but when you're going through a whole album and you're listening to any album and you're trying to dissect it and find everything that's little. I was cracking up a couple ones, man. Like they threw up a line about like Stone Cold Steve Austin and shit in there. And he's like he starts talking about the Riddler and Here Comes the Gravediggaz. I was like, dude, just creative dudes. It reminds me like freestyling, and it's like, oh, that line was perfect. When you hear those things about shit that you automatically love, it's like these dudes are creative. They're grimy street dudes from New York, but they get creative. They throw out those Steve Austin lines. They throw out those Riddler lines.
But in New York, I mean, they were all trying to be as true the lyricist as they possibly could.
And it was
be, right?
noticeable big time for me on this album, man. This is just a fun album, bro. Seriously, as much as horror rap it is, and to even touch on the horror rap a little bit, you see that it started early with, as I think you brought up, the Gangsta Nip. The Gangsta Nip was started. Brother Lynch Hongo took
Flatliners,
went full tilt with it in Sacramento.
You also have Mystic Styles,
Mystic 3-6 Mafia, as we just talked
Tennessee.
about. Having Q on here, we just talked about having that horror rap from Mystic Styles, and 3-6 Mafia went with it. And I find that these guys might have been the first guys on the East Coast to really take that horror rap approach. And I started to listen to right away it came to me like, I wonder if guys like who came later, like I hear a resemblance from maybe nonfiction was influenced by this album, The Gravediggaz. I bet you if you were to ask them who they listened to in the 90s, it would have been this album was probably on their list. Or even a Necro who's like gone, he's like a chunk later, but still at the same time he was putting out those horror raps that was from New York. And I'm like, right. I bet you that album's on his list. It kind of filled that void of horror rap in '94. And the funny thing is like what you said, it takes you for a ride. It's smooth, it's horror rap, it's just done so well. It's just everything about it's got a nice touch on it, and I think it's a great album.
What about the features? I mean, you got Shabazz and Killer Priest on 2 different songs. You have Dreddy Kruger.
I had no problem with Shabazz or Killer Priest verse. I to be honest, besides noticing the fact that Gravediggaz Chambers sort of didn't have its place too much like the other tracks did, I didn't really have a problem with any verses, man. There's not one verse that bothered me that much. So no, what about you though?
I was not a fan of the Dreddy Kruger shit. I'm not really sure what went on there. I mean, I'm not going to talk shit about it, dude. I wasn't impressed with what he was being compared to on the rest of the album. It felt like it kind of was out of place. But again, it's on a song I said was out of place. I wasn't a huge fan of Killer Priest or Shabazz on Graveyard. And I thought, the other verses on there were kind of, they were decent. But the rest of the album and what you're comparing them to, it didn't work for me, especially if you go back to Diaries of a Madman. Shabazz destroys that shit.
I think
he kills it.
now that you say that, I kind of think of it. I would have had no problem just to hear no features on this. I think it was one of those type of albums that really did, and I think in a lot of times you don't need, especially unnecessary features that don't really smash you in the head. Like when you have that many members in the group, there's enough features on the group, right? So, but when Shabazz comes through, kills that on Diary of a Madman, you can't be mad at it. Put it on there. But when you ask me about the features, I wouldn't be mad if there was no features on here.
Yeah. If they kept it just the Shabazz verse on Diaries, then I think that would have worked for me.
Exactly.
I thought the rest of it wasn't necessary to be there.
Yeah.
Whether people love that shit or not, I mean, fuck, maybe let us know.
Yeah.
I just, for me, it wasn't working for me. But who knows, man? Maybe people out there thought Killer Priest's best verse he's ever kicked on that shit.
Yeah, maybe.
So
You
who
never
knows?
know. You never know. And at the end of the day, as I said, these guys, I'm actually going to go and listen to the Sickle tonight just to compare, because like I said, ever since I heard this album and really took the time to listen to this album, I was impressed with everybody that was a part of it. It was, if I had to give this album a rate out of 10, I'd probably, it's so hard to do this. I feel like I'm knocking an album down, but the 10 is so high. You're like on an upper echelon if you're like a 10 album.
Again, that's something we've also discussed.
Right.
For me, you're talking about the golden era of a music generation.
Yeah.
In those 10 years, how many 10s should come out of a golden generation,
Yeah.
you know?
No, and that's exactly what I mean.
2 or 3 a year should be pinnacle shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There should be, at the end of the day, for yourself, there should be at least 10. You know, but again, that's up to you. It's how much. What are you looking for? How many flaws are you letting slip by? How many things are you looking for that need to be checked off to make that grade? Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, give me a sec before you grade it. What ended up being the best song for you? I know you prefer to pick one or two, and that's fine. If you got to pick a couple, but if there's one that really stands out,
Mommy, What's a Gravedigger?
Yeah.
Told you that right when I heard that. And I think when we first started chatting through text and stuff like that, you were like, well, what are you thinking? What's your best? And I went with 1-800-Suicide. And don't get me wrong, that song is off the chain. I'll bump it nonstop. But I really had to like step back on myself with the only, and the good thing is about Mommy, What's a Gravedigger and why it's my favorite is I've heard other songs like that with a sick beat like that and all of that type of stuff. But when a song is short like that, I think it's 1:45 or something like that. When you hear a song that short, if it's not executed, you're like, oh, what? It's over? Like you didn't do it. But that for a 1:45 song, they killed every second of it from beat to verses and just everything. Like I said, the Prince Rakim shout out, I loved right away. Like it was just showed the love between them, and I was just like, this is just dope. Like this is dope. So Mommy, What's a Gravedigger, hands down.
Yeah, the menacing dark beat of Constant Elevation.
Oh, sick.
That had me right off the bat too, and I ended up kind of comparing the rest of the beat to it the first couple times I listened to it. I know, like back in the day, and was like, holy, okay.
Yeah.
But then sat down and really absorbed the whole thing. I remember like back in the 90s when I had this, I listened to it constantly. I think there was months where I listened to it like every day. Mind you, I listened to other types of music at the same time, but I was listening to 3-4 albums a day if I could. Just throw it on and bump the hell out of it. But one other thing I did love about this album was Defective Trip or Trippin'.
Yeah.
Felt like the Gravediggaz version of My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say the song I was thinking of. Go ahead. I'm going to let you finish, though.
What's sick, too, about that connection is the great Ghetto Boys were originally another horror
rap
group out there, right?
Right.
So that sort of crossover of losing your sanity.
Yeah.
And horrorcore, and
I mean,
listen to a lot of the shit that is on Mystic Styles with 3-6 Mafia.
Yeah, I actually just listened to that.
It's
album,
the same thing. Like it's a lot of going insane.
Yeah.
But they really kind of narrowed it down and said this song is going to be bonkers. We're going to go right crazy.
Yeah.
And it was the same with My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me, right?
Exactly. And it was funny that you said with Defective Trip or whatever, when you said, I thought you were going to say it and I was going to be mad if you did because it's such a wild comparison. I might get a little backlash about my memory here, but there's that song in it was like a Vietnam War song or whatever. It's in Forrest Gump. Something's happening here, and it's got that. That's what that beat reminds me of with the guitar or whatever.
Yeah,
if you really listen to that, you're like, this is the horror East Coast rap version of that song, which is an absolute hit. It's probably been in endless movies.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that came where it's like the guitar and the way that it played, like it doesn't give you that, but for me it gave it right away. And to even compare something in 94 from the hip hop game that was kind of just starting to blossom and flourish fully was just it's wild, man. I was like, that's a dope comparison. I enjoyed it, but the mind playing tricks on me, I can definitely see that as well.
Yeah, that killed me when I made that connection. I just started fucking laughing. I was like, dude. And then I went and listened to that shit. Obviously love Scarface. Obviously Scarface, but I was thinking too is you do see that RZA took more control of the sickle, which I do have to go back and re-listen to, so I won't speak too much on it. Is you don't hear, did Prince Paul have anything to do with the production there? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just curious, you didn't get those Defective Trip 1-800-Suicides type of instrumentals from him, really, on the sickle. I do remember that much. I was kind of like, I would have to go back and dissect it and see exactly what was going on.
It's
there
another
because
time,
there's some shit on there I absolutely loved. There was some shit on there that was real sort of scientific and broken down, and you kind of had to give it a minute, like you listen to some Aesop Rock shit. But no, I think Prince Paul actually had his moment on there. Again, you're right. I don't know if he brought the first half of this album to the sickle.
Right, is what I'm saying, which is it can be looked at bad or good, but preference-wise, I was like, I would have loved to see that, like, that guitar type production that he put into onto that. But everybody flourishes in different ways. As you said about RZA with the pop, because you try new things.
They grow as well, right?
Exactly.
Like, I mean, in between that time and Prince Paul, I believe it was in between, if not around the same time that the sickle came out. I'm pretty sure he put out a Prince Amongst Thieves, which was...
I've seen...
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if you know what this is. He actually took all these people and he wrote like a play. And they wrapped the whole story, and each song is the next act to the play. Dude, we'll check that album out at some point. That shit is bonkers.
Definitely got to have that on an episode. And when you talk about features, it's kind of crazy you said that, because now my brain's starting to go a little bit. I would have loved to see two people on this, one of them or both of them on different tracks. I would have actually, because of it's the Too Poetic, and the ODB comparison, I would have loved to see ODB drop some sort of intro, bridge, or verse on this. Because first of all, he's grimy as hell. Probably if you wanted to pick just rugged, grimy dude, probably the most in Wu-Tang. And then I would have loved to see Meth on this. Meth just crushes everything he touches. I would have thought Meth would have been dope. I don't know what song, but I think that he never really fails to deliver. So to see what he would have delivered on this would have been fucking cool. And then just because of that comparison, I would have been, because when you think about it, and we're living in fantasy land doing this with the features and what it would have been like. But to me, I would have been like, okay, I think they would have been kind of, I would love to see what Too Poetic would have came up with an ODB verse. And I wonder if ODB would have brought that, like, the best he could type of thing, because they do have that comparison. And it was the very beginning of the Gravediggaz and pretty much the very beginning of the Wu-Tang. And there is a comparison there, but they're both sick. So, but those two, I
can't say I wouldn't enjoy listening
those two features I would have loved to see on this album.
All right. Well, out of 10, I'm gonna go a 7.5.
A 7.5. That's.
Remember, this is a debut album by people that I have a lot of respect for. I like a lot of what they've done. Mm-hmm. Some of it's underground, some of it's a little more commercial. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I love Fruquan. I love listening to what Prince Paul has to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Love RZA. Huge. Had a huge influence when I was making music myself.
Yeah.
And obviously Too Poetic is a fucking animal.
Yeah. Loved all of them, man, for sure.
I like this one, I think, better than The Sickle, but
Yeah.
What do you say?
Totally agreed. So I'm going to give this a 6.5. 6.5. It's a high rating for me. I'm naturally more of a West Coast guy, but when you give me East Coast albums like this, it's undeniable. And I think anybody that listens to hip hop, Big Heat over there who runs the camera for us, we've been listening to Gravediggaz for, you know, a lot of the time that we get together going over stuff, and he loves it. It's one of those albums you just cannot deny. 6.5 from me. Unbelievable album. So I think it was said. So we got good ratings, pretty good ratings, and great ratings on Onyx. We got 2 good ratings on Gravediggaz, and we would love to hear what the viewers and subscribers would love to. We'd love to hear your opinion on what you think of these albums. Which one's better? What you would rate either of them, and why. We'd love to hear it, and we got more to come. 90 proof, baby.